This week on the Paddock Press Report, the third and final leg of the Belmont Stakes is set to be held for a third and final time in a row at Saratoga Racecourse. Three of the top four Derby finishers got a rematch, and who else could play spoiler? Plus, a broadcasting legend, Donna Brothers, reflects on all those memories made at NBC. We take a look at all the other major Grade 1 races this weekend at Saratoga, a horrific morning workout accident at Parks Racetrack. We have the latest on the injuries to the rider and horses involved. A stud deal and change of ownership have arrived for the Preakness winner. Plus, Saturday is the Epsom Derby. We have a look at that field. And the nation's youngest full-time track announcer, Nathan Klein, comes on the show to talk about his journey to this exciting new chapter. Welcome and thanks for joining the Paddock Press Report. I'm Timothy Lateau. It's an exciting week, headlined by the third and final leg of the Triple Crown, the Belmont Stakes, to be held for the third and final time in a row this year at Saratoga Racecourse. Of course, the distance is abbreviated to a mile and a quarter from a mile and a half, the usual distance. And it is headlined by a number of great horses in here, many coming from the Derby, six of those horses actually. You've got the Derby 1-2 finishers, Golden Tempo and Renegade, set to square off again as well. Belmont won it last year with Sovereignty. This year he brings Derby fourth place finisher Chief Wallaby. Then there's also Chad Brown. This is his hometown track in Saratoga. You know he'd love to win the Belmont Stakes at Saratoga. He brings three contenders to the race. It's the 158th Belmont Stakes, again to be run at a mile and a quarter at Saratoga. $2 million race. And we'll go from the rail out. Looking at these contenders here, you've got Vitruvian Man coming from the one hole. He's 30-1 for trainer Doug O'Neill, ridden by Antonio Frazo. He was third in the Santa Anita Derby last out. Number two is Power Shift, 12-1 for trainer Todd Pletcher, ridden by Luis Saez. He's coming off of a win, breaking his maiden at Churchill Downs on Derby Day. And there's Chief Wallaby. He is 3-1, the second choice in the race for trainer Belmont, ridden by Junior Alvarado. That combo won the Belmont Stakes last year with Sovereignty. Chief Wallaby was fourth in the Kentucky Derby. Number four is Renegade, 2-1 morning line favorite for trainer Todd Pletcher. He is ridden by Irad Ortiz, coming off of that runner-up performance in the Kentucky Derby, where he came up just a head short. Number five is Otinho, 20-1 for trainer Chad Brown, ridden by Dylan Davis, coming off of a runner-up performance in the Bluegrass Stakes back in April. Number six is Growth Equity at 12-1 for trainer Chad Brown, ridden by Manny Franco. He's coming off of a win in the local prep in the Peter Pan Stakes. Number seven is Commandment, 6-1 for trainer Brad Cox, ridden by John Velasquez, seventh last out in the Kentucky Derby for this Florida Derby winner. Number eight is Emerging Market. He is 6-1 for Brown again, ridden by Flavian Pratt. This is Brown's best chance. This horse was 10th in the Kentucky Derby. And then number nine, Golden Tempo, that familiar outside post. He is 9-2, the third choice in this field of nine for trainer Cherie DeVoe, ridden by Jose Ortiz, of course, coming off of that historic win and thrilling finish in the Kentucky Derby. The Belmont Stakes will be broadcast on Fox on Saturday, coverage all week long as well on all the different Fox Sports networks. But of course, the first two legs of the Triple Crown were on NBC, and that is where one broadcasting legend has decided to call it a career after 26 years. Of course, I'm talking about the legendary broadcaster Donna Brothers. We reflected back on all those years of memories at NBC. Well, it is a tremendous honor to be joined by Donna Brothers, a legendary rider and broadcaster, broadcasting with NBC for 26 years, and just had her final broadcast a couple of weeks ago at the Preakness. Donna, it is truly an honor to have you. Thanks so much for coming on.
Timothy, it's my pleasure. I always like talking horses, but especially with somebody who's equally passionate about horses and horse racing. So thank you.
Definitely, yeah. Well, how have you been? I know you had your broadcast a couple of weeks back at the Preakness, Napoleon Solo winning, and yeah, just how have the last a couple of weeks been since then?
Well, I haven't had any downtime yet. So after Baltimore, I flew back to Louisville. And then a week later, my husband and I drove up to Saratoga Springs, where we have a second home. And so we spend the summer in Saratoga Springs. And then Tuesday of Belmont Stakes week. So I'm not sure. We're recording this on a Saturday. So in a couple of days, we have an event called Embrace the Belmont coming up in Saratoga Springs that I host, and I'm the MC. I have collaborators, co-collaborators with me, so it's not all me, but we've been working hard on making that event come together. The sort of impetus of the event is 3 years ago when the Saratoga Racecourse first welcomed the Belmont Stakes to this community. Some friends of mine who also passionate in horse racing, Rachel Dunn from Saratoga Racing, Laura Samel from Stars Aligned Racing. We talked about how we felt like a lot of the business owners in Saratoga are interested in horse racing. They like the idea of horse racing, but maybe don't really understand it. And so we created this event for people who have businesses or have clientele in Saratoga to Tuesday of Belmont Stakes week, go to the event, listen to our expert panel of handicappers, which includes Seth Merrow, Sarah Baldwin, and Matthew DeSantis, and so that they could be conversational about the Belmont Stakes and maybe go to the Belmont Stakes with some real opinion about who they like and why, instead of just what they're going to wear. So anyway, that was a long answer to the question of I haven't actually got to relax yet, but I'm sure I will after the Belmont Stakes.
Yeah, we know Triple Crown season's always such a busy time. Do you like anyone in particular for the Belmont?
I'd have to be rooting for Golden Tempo again. It was such a magical Kentucky Derby. I thought he ran, first of all, as you may recall, he was my pick in the Kentucky Derby. And when on air, we have 10 seconds to talk about who we like and why. And there was no way that I could put all the reasons why I liked Golden Tempo into 10 seconds. So given the way the walkover went with Cherie DeVoe and us talking about the possibility of her becoming the first woman to win the Kentucky Derby, I just said, look, I'm rooting for history. Would love to see that happen. But the reality is that I did love the way Golden Tempo came into the race. And in talking with Cherie and then looking at him Derby week, I felt like he was really just getting fit at that time. Like he was starting to peak that week of Kentucky Derby. And I think Cherie's done a great job with him since. I haven't seen him in person, but I've seen his works and I've seen some pictures of him. He looks like he's holding his weight well. And so I expect for him to come into the Belmont Stakes as well as he did the Derby. I'm not going to get off of him now.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. I'm sure that moment, was one of your favorites throughout your broadcasting career. Do you have any other kind of, favorite moments too, or I guess where does that rank too, just among some of the greatest, moments that you've been able to been there to broadcast?
Well, I can honestly say that Kentucky Derby 152 will go down as my favorite ever because so many things came together. First of all, it was my last on NBC, last of 26 consecutive, to have the first woman win it. The interview with Jose Ortiz after the race, he was so expressive, so emotional. He really talked about what was in his heart. I felt like his message was great to the listeners and to the children in Puerto Rico who look up to him as somebody they want to aspire to be. So that's always going to be my favorite Kentucky Derby, but I feel like I was blessed to be a part of the first Triple Crown in 37 years to cover all three legs of that with American Pharoah in 2015. And then just 3 years later, my good friend Mike Smith, who, when I was an apprentice rider, he mentored me. He was a journeyman, successful. He kind of took me under his wing. He became a lifelong friend, still is. And to be able to be there for him to win the Triple Crown 3 years later with Justify. But I don't know how long your podcast is, but it would have to be 2 hours for me to go into in-depth discussion about all of my favorite moments. But those are the ones that would stand out.
For sure, yeah. Let's talk about that too. Whether it's your riding career or in your broadcasting career, are there, certain figures who really kind of helped shape your career? I know a lot of it too. You were such a pioneer, both as a rider and as a broadcaster. You kind of, I feel, really created and enhanced this role. But were there, are there certain people that you want to talk about that, really helped kind of shape, you in your journey through your career?
Well, I would be remiss not to mention my mother. So she became a jockey in 1969. So she was one of the first half dozen women to be licensed as a jockey in the United States. And she was for sure my first mentor. I admired everything about her. She was a great parent. She was a great human being, and she was a great jockey. And I've often said if she ever experienced anything like gender discrimination, she never gave it a voice. And so I didn't grow up in a household that knew anything about, like, I didn't know that there could be a thing like gender discrimination. My brother and I were best friends. He was 360 days younger than me. So we were like Irish twins. And I just didn't ever grow up in that world of that there's anything that boys can do that girls can't do. So I'm really grateful for that. And so that was sort of the mindset that I carried into my career as a jockey. And then my first Kentucky Derby live was 1988. I started riding professionally in 1987. 1988, Winning Colors wins the Derby, which was perfect timing for me when I walked into a trainer's barn and they were like, well, that's really nice, but I don't ride a girl. And I'm like, like Winning Colors doesn't, fillies don't typically win the Kentucky Derby, but if you give them a chance, sometimes they prove that they're not only on equal footing, they can be better. And so it really gave me, I guess, some sort of an example, an outlier that allowed me to give them an example of how it's possible that females can be not only just as good but better. And then when I became a racing analyst, my first mentor was Mike Battaglia because I worked with him at Churchill Downs doing the racing analysis and handicapping at Churchill. But then when I started doing the coverage, I was blessed to work with Tom Hammond and Charles C. Canny, Bob Newmeyer, again, Mike Battaglia. Kenny Bryce joined our team the year later. And Charles C. was the first on-track reporter ever. She was galloping horses in New York when I think it was kind of local television first, but then ABC asked her if she could give some on-air commentary from horseback on the track. And so when I started doing it, Charles C. was part of our team. So I could ask Charles C. for advice. I could ask Tom Hammond for advice. Um, Really, I just learned a lot through them. I remember one time asking Tom and Charles C., so if so-and-so wins, should I ask blah, blah? I can't remember what it was that I asked. And Charles C. looked at me and said, Donna, I think you need to make sure that your answer is not, I mean, that your question is never longer than the potential answer. So, in other words, my question was long and maybe even convoluted. So they helped me to sort of, simplify the questions, ask one question at a time. And one of the things that Tom Hammond often drove home was that if you are about to cover a historic moment, be prepared. And so, like on the precipice of the potential triple crowns that we had in advance of American Pharaoh. I think there were at least four. We had Smarty Jones and Big Brown and I'll Have Another. And so we had all these different ones that we thought could be the one, and then they weren't. But Tom always impressed upon us to be ready for that historical moment because it will be replayed in infinity. And so you want to make sure that you're proud of what you brought to that coverage of that historical event. So anyway, yeah, I was lucky to have lots of great mentors. And then the team that I ended up working with for the last few years, Nick Luck, Brittany Urton, still Kenny Rice. On the big days, we have, Steve Kornacki and Mike Tirico and Ahmed Farid and Randy Moss and Jerry Bailey are always there. And I can tell you that their work ethic is second to none. They all work really, really tirelessly. I don't even want to say really hard because I don't feel like any of us think of it as hard work, right? But we do feel like we put a lot of hours into making sure that we understand all the stories and all the people. And so it was really quite a blessing to be able to work with them and our producer, Lindsay Shanzer, who headed the whole team.
For sure, yeah, yeah. It's such a great team on air and behind the scenes. We know that you've talked about a lot that have certainly been a big role in your career. You talked about American Pharaoh too. Back in 2015, I remember that broadcast. I've gone back and watched the clips of it on YouTube or even the whole thing. And that Tom Hammond. I remember too reading in Tom Hammond's book. He put his hand up on air. He wanted a long pause. Just for people to kind of soak in the images and the crowd and just what that moment meant, all those people, just cheering on that horse and Victor Espinoza. And then you were really one of the, Tom Hammond had a quick line maybe, and then you really were kind of the first person that was talking after that. What was that like? I just remember your excitement too was just so enthusiastic and you're such a fan of the sport too. What was that like, doing that interview with Victor after, such a long wait, and then it all culminating in that moment?
Well, first of all, before they came to me, there was a Latino family on the outside fence, a husband, wife, and two kids. I would say the kids were aged like 10 to 12. They weren't tiny, old enough to understand horse racing, but not necessarily teenagers yet. And so as soon as the horses crossed the wire and the cheers broke out, the family, one of the people in the family said, "Did he win? Did he win?" And I said, "Yes." And they just started like cheering and crying. And I felt this emotion that I feel right now come to the surface. And I was like, no, 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 not the time, not the place, right? This is Victor Espinoza's moment. This is American Pharaoh's moment. And so I was keenly interested to learn what was in Victor Espinoza's heart as he crossed the wire. And, the first jockey in 37 years, first jockey and horse to achieve this. And I was equally disappointed in the answer that he gave me, because the very first question I asked him, I can't even remember what it was, but I can remember that his answer was to thank his sponsor, because
Monster,
it
if I
was
remember.
it was an energy drink. I won't even go into who it is because I don't like that sort of stuff being
Sure, yeah.
part of the history, right? So,
Yeah.
like, this is a historic moment, and he wants to thank his energy drink sponsor at that moment. And I felt like that was inappropriate. And
Mhm.
it took away from the moment, from the magic of the moment, the historical significance of it, the accomplishment of American Pharaoh. We got over that, obviously. And I asked him another two or three questions, and the interview was fine. It got better once we got away from talking about the sponsor. And then I was assigned with following American Pharaoh for the rest of it. So I followed him back to the barn. I went back, got off my horse, followed him on foot back to the test barn. We did a report from the test barn on what he's doing right now. And here he is getting his bath and all that sort of stuff. And then after that, then I had to make my way back to our NBC trailers, which was down by the quarter pole of Belmont Park. Hurry up, get ready, head back to the hotel. And we all went to dinner. So I had to run out, change real quickly. We were staying in Garden City Hotel, go to dinner. Lots of people there from, the American Pharaoh team. And so it wasn't until the next morning I got up and I went to get in the shower to get ready to go to the airport. And that was when it hit me, like, it happened. The Triple Crown happened on my watch. And I just started bawling because but I felt like I didn't get to feel that emotion like everybody else got to feel at the time, right? Like, I had to contain it. And it's every time I talk about it, it's still there. So it obviously meant a lot to me, but I couldn't enjoy it in the moment the way that other people could.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure that's happened, a number of your times too throughout your career, even on the maybe some of the Triple Crown misses too. I even think back to the year before that, 2014, Tonalist won the Belmont. You beat California Chrome, who finished fourth that day, and
Mhm.
you had an interview. It was Victor Espinoza and then Joel Rosario back to back. Kind of after such a crushing loss, and then I think it was Joel Rosario's first Belmont Stakes win that day too. Then, what's that like in that moment? Is you literally have to talk to two different jockeys in a span of minutes, and one's going through a crushing loss, and one it's one of the best days of their lives.
Yeah, we don't like to be in that position, but when it comes down to the Triple Crown, we decided back when Smarty Jones was going for it in 2004, he became a household favorite for kids. Kids love that name, right? Smarty Jones. Like, just tell them the name and that's their horse. And so I had to go to Stuart Elliott before the races that day. And I said, "Look, Stuart, I don't, I want to win it. I want you to win this race, and I want to interview you after the race as the first Triple Crown winner in however many years. But the fact remains that there is a chance you could get beat, right? This is horse racing. And if in fact he doesn't win, there are going to be little kids crying in their living room. They're just going to want to know that Smarty Jones is okay. And so if he doesn't win, are you okay with me coming to you even before I go to the winner and just make sure the horse is okay and all that?" And he said, "Yes, absolutely." And he was fantastic about it. And so it was sort of a precedence that we started then, and we just carried through because we decided anytime there's a Triple Crown on the line, whoever wins, if it's not the Triple Crown horse, people want to know if the horse is okay. That's the main thing. Is the horse okay? And so we needed to talk to them right afterwards and make sure the horse is okay before we could move on to the celebration, because I think the people at home also would feel the same way. They're not going to be able to celebrate in this win of Total List and the Christopher Clement barn at the time and Joel Rosario if they don't know that California Chrome is okay. So that's why we did that. And it was really just sort of like you have to take care of this business before you can move on to that business. And in every case like that, if you go back to Sarava and uh, Birdstone, who beat Smarty Jones, Tonalist. In every case, the jockey on the winning horse had a subdued celebration. They were like, "This is great. I'm so happy to win the Belmont Stakes. I too wish we would have had a Triple Crown winner." So it was always a subdued sort of celebration from the jockey.
Yeah, sure, yeah. And I know, obviously being a reporter, someone on air, you're not making the media rights decisions behind the scenes, but there was a span in the kind of like mid 2000s, and then now with Fox with the Belmont, there's a span in the mid 2000s as well when ESPN had the Belmont and then like the Breeders' Cup. Are there any races that, or maybe even more historically, even before that, are there any races that you wish that you could have covered or could have, been there for an interview that, maybe you haven't, that you thought, wow, that was, such a big moment for horse racing that you think it would have been neat to kind of be on that broad?
Without a question, Zenyatta. Zenyatta, when she won the Breeders' Cup Classic, it was on ESPN, and I was actually doing a show somewhere, I can't remember, somewhere in the United States for NBC covering PBR, professional bull riding. And I was in a production meeting at the time that the race ran. And so when I got out of the production meeting, I had told my friend to watch the race for me and text me and let me know. So she texted me and she said Zenyatta won. And so I pulled up the replay right away on my phone and I'm watching it. She's not a huge horse racing person. And so as I'm watching that race on my phone, I'm thinking, she's got the wrong horse. There's no way Zenyatta wins from here, right? You remember that when she went out in California. And so she came from dead last and just got up in the final jump. And yeah, that would have been pretty cool to cover the Breeders' Cup for her. And then the subsequent year, she ran at Churchill Downs and came down to a stretch duel between Zenyatta and Blame. My husband and I were at the track. Now, my husband trained horses for Claiborne Farm, and he trained the sire of Blame. But before the race, when we talked about who do we want to win, we both were like, oh, I don't care. Like either Zenyatta or Blame, right? We want one of them to win, but neither one of us felt like we had a preference. And then we were watching the race at the TV, and as it came down to like the 16th pole, I start going, come on, Zenyatta, come on, Zenyatta. My husband's next to me going, come on, Blame, come on, Blame. So we learned in that last 16th of a mile that in fact we did have a preference, right? And so anyway, it was a fun race to watch, but it would have been a lot more fun to cover it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And we were talking earlier too. You talked about the importance of aftercare, and you always had that saddle cloth on your pony. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance is the saddle tally you referred to. They started in 2013. I've been on the board off and on for the last several years. I say off and on because your term expires after a while and you have to sit out for a year. But in any event, in 2013, a bunch of industry stakeholders got together and just said, like, look, we can't take care of horses as an afterthought. Like, we can't be having annual bake sales or monthly bake sales to fund something that is this big. And so when the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance was formed, the idea was to get systemic funding from within the industry. So the sales companies, the breeding farms, the horse owners, the horse trainers, jockeys for that matter. Everybody who makes a living on horses needs to make sure that these horses have a safe exit from racing. And so the two primary functions of the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance is to accredit aftercare organizations, because prior to them, you could donate your money to an aftercare organization and it may genuinely be a 501c3, but it didn't really regulate how the money was spent. So if you're accredited by the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance, that means that the money that is donated to your program through the TAA has to go to the care of the horses. If you want to build a new barn, that's a separate fundraiser that you have to do on your own, like a barn raising fundraiser. And the second part of the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance, besides the accreditation, is also the funding. But the money that we bring in, again, is from the industry. It's systemically funded through the industry, but it doesn't cover all the expenses of these aftercare organizations. So they still have to do their own fundraisers. And when people donate to the TAA, it does directly help all of those different organizations. But if you have one that you really love, they can still use your donation dollars or your volunteer time, because at the end of the day, Tim, I've always said, we'll be judged by the way we take care of our horses, but more so after they are no longer of use to us than while they are of use to us. And so it's been important to me and a lot of people in this sport for a long time.
Definitely, yeah. And we know that's been such an important conversation, increasingly throughout time. And Donna, talk about, a little bit about what kind of the next chapter of your life holds.
I don't know. So we just got up to Saratoga Springs, as I mentioned earlier, and there's two things that I know are first and foremost. I won't be spending 6 hours in front of the computer every day anymore. And I look forward to that. I probably won't be at the races a whole lot this summer. I'll probably just take a good 3 months away, and I'll spend a lot of time hiking in the Adirondacks and riding my bike and doing some stand-up paddle boarding. For me, the first step is to get grounded in nature, and then I'll just see where my energy wants to go. I still have a lot of energy. I did retire at 60, but I'm not 80 and I don't feel 80. I just need to pull away for a little bit because this is something that I've been deeply immersed in horse racing since I was 17 years old. I've worked on the track since I was 10 years old, whether that was summer jobs or on the weekends. And so it's just time for me to pull away just a little bit and just reset, recalibrate. And then like I said, I still have a lot of energy and we'll see where that takes me, but I refuse to make any decisions about it until I've recalibrated.
Sure, yeah, definitely some much needed time. I know you've had such a busy schedule. And kind of my last thought here is, throughout, I think so much of your time on air and behind the scenes and in other interviews too, like this, you always kind of, have either kids and younger fans and younger people in the industry kind of either at the forefront or in the back of your mind, really kind of through anything that you do. Do you have any kind of advice that you'd want to give to anyone, whether they're in any sort of role in the industry or broadcasting or anything like that?
Well, I think one of the things that is misunderstood is how many different roles you could play and still be in the sport of horse racing. And so, from the racing office to, I mean, obviously all the jobs that are on the backside, starting with hot walker, which is an entry level position, but you're not going to get a job as a groom if you're not a hot walker first. And so it's just like in any sport or any industry, I should say. Um, Even doctors do residencies, right? Everybody starts on the bottom and works their way up. And so there's so many different ways, from breeding farms to industry suppliers, people who make tack for the sport. Obviously, covering horse racing is one way to do it, but even on our NBC broadcast, I think we have something like 165 to 185 people that are there on the NBC compound putting that show on. And what the viewers see are 10 of us on air. Well, there's 155 people back there who are as big a contribution to this production as the on-air talent, but you don't see them. And so there's just so many different ways, but you have to start by getting your foot in the door, like going to the track, getting to know people, introducing yourself to people, and then becoming aware of what all the options are, whether it's a jocks agent or taking entries or working as a mutual clerk at the track, whatever it is you want to do, you'll be able to find something to do. And then you can just decide from there, once you have an inside view of it, which direction you want to go with that.
Sure, yeah. Well, Donna, it has really been such an honor. You've been such a huge inspiration to me, and I know so many other people in the industry. And everyone I know wishes you the best in the next chapter in your life. And yeah, we are just so thankful for your time, always being so gracious. And yeah, just thank you so much for coming on.
It's my pleasure, Timothy. Thank you for your passion in horse racing and thanks for having me.
And on Saturday, older horses will clash on the Saratoga Dirt in the Grade 1 Met Mile, featuring a great showdown between Journalism, Nysos, and Knightsbridge. Bob Baffert conditions Nysos, the 9-5 favorite, ridden by Flavian Pratt. He comes off a second place finish in the Saudi Cup. Last season, he ended the year with a win in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Journalism is the 5-2 second choice, ridden by Jose Ortiz, trained by Michael McCarthy. Last year's Preakness Stakes winner was third in his debut this year in the Oaklawn Handicap. Belmont's Knightsbridge is 6 for 9 in his career, looking for his biggest win here, his first Grade 1 win. He's 7-2, ridden by Junior Alvarado, but he comes off the only off-the-board finish in his career when he was 6th on Derby Day in the Churchill Downs Stakes. And a race later on Saturday at Saratoga, the Turf Titans will clash going a mile and 3/16 in the Grade 1 Manhattan Stakes. The 2-1 morning line favorite is Rhetorical, trained by Will Walden. Irad Ortiz will be aboard, and he headlines this field of 9. Last out, Rhetorical won on Derby Day at Churchill Downs in the Grade 1 Turf Classic. Bright Picture is an intriguing French-bred and trained horse making his American debut for legendary French trainer Andre Faber. He comes off of a second-place finish in late April in the Group 1 Prix Guinée. He's the 3-1 second choice with Flavian Pratt in the irons. And then at 7-2, the third choice is defending champ Deterministic for trainer Miguel Clement and rider Kendrick Carmouche. He's on a 4-race win streak that includes this race last year. Last out, he won the Grade 3 Fort Marcy in his 2026 debut. And a day earlier at Saratoga, the 3-year-old fillies will clash on the dirt going a mile in the Grade 1 Acorn Stakes, and it is headlined by Kentucky Oaks winner Always a Runner, making her first start since that big Grade 1 victory. Always a Runner is the 4-5 favorite in a short field of 5 for trainer Chad Brown. Jose Ortiz is aboard. Stiff competition will come from Michael McCarthy's Meaning, who is 3-1. She was only second by a length and a quarter in the Oaks. Juan Hernandez has the return call. And the race after that is the Grade 1 New York Stakes for fillies and mares, 4-year-olds and up, going a mile and 3/16 on the turf. And of all the races this weekend, it might have one of the most intriguing storylines. You'll recall from our past coverage that owner Peter Brandt removed most of his horses from trainer Chad Brown's stable. One of those was last year's Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf champion, Jazora. Jazora was second to another one of Chad Brown's runners, Kathy and Marissa, on Derby weekend at Churchill in the Modesty Stakes. Kathy and Marissa is owned by Michael Dubb and Michael Caruso. Brandt was upset that Brown didn't think the 5-pound weight difference was a big deal, so he pulled Jazora from Brown after that race, then gave her to Belmont. Now these two fillies rematch at Saratoga with Kathy and Marissa as the 5-2 favorite for Brown and Jose Ortiz. Meanwhile, Jazora is the 3-1 second choice for Mott and John Velasquez. You can probably bet at more than bragging rights and $750,000 purse are on the line in this race. And the last Grade 1 race on Friday at Saratoga is the Grade 1 Ogden Phipps, running a mile and an eighth on the dirt for fillies and mares, 4-year-olds and up. It is headlined by Nitrogen, coming off of that runner-up finish in the Grade 1 Apple Blossom Handicap. Now, Mark Casse trains her, Jose Ortiz rides in what is sure to be a big weekend for Ortiz. Nitrogen is the 7-5 favorite. Biggest competition comes from Chad Brown's fully subscribed at 7-2. Flavian Pratt rides the runner-up in the La Troyenne last out. And onto other headlines, and a horrific accident at Parks Racetrack. An early morning training accident put an exercise rider in the hospital in critical condition, and 2 horses were killed. Hector Cotto was working horse for trainer Butch Reed when another horse got loose and collided with them head on. Neither horse survived. Cotto has extensive fractures to his jaw, arm, and multiple ribs, according to the Pollock report. Reed says Cotto has been working for him for the last 5 years. Reed's daughter, Whitney, started a GoFundMe where this photo of Cotto was posted. Well, this might be one of the first years ever that the Kentucky Derby winner and Preakness Stakes winner both have stud deals even before the Belmont Stakes. Now get this, Golden Tempo, the Derby winner and Preakness winner Napoleon Solo are both set to stand at Lane's End Farm upon their retirements. Napoleon Solo also has a new owner. Bloodstock agent David Ngordo, who's married to Golden Tempo's trainer Cherie DeVoe, helped to broker each stud deal. As for Napoleon Solo's new owner, Al Gold sold him to the unknown group Espoir USA, or ESPOIR. The price was also not made public, but Napoleon Solo will remain in training with Chad Summers. He's still targeting the Haskell Stakes next and is expected to remain in training at age 4. Well, Saturday is also the second leg of the English Triple Crown, and of course, Aidan O'Brien holds a very strong hand in that race. Aidan O'Brien has the expected favorite, Benvenuto Cellini. He comes off a win in the Group 3 Chester Vase. That race is more than a mile and a half long. O'Brien has another 5 contenders still under consideration as of Tuesday. The stiffest competition will come from Andrew Balding trained and Juddmonte-owned Item. Item is undefeated, coming off of a win in the Group 2 Dante Stakes. Pretty traditional prep race there. The post position draw will take place on Wednesday. Penn National Racecourse in Grantville, Pennsylvania, near Harrisburg, has been open for 54 years, but get this, it's only had 3 different announcers in its entire history. Earlier this year, John Bogart retired, and now 21-year-old Nathan Klein is set to become the youngest full-time track announcer in the entire country. We caught up earlier this week. Well, it is such an honor now to be joined by Nathan Klein, the youngest track announcer, full-time track announcer in the country, and Penn National's next track announcer, making his debut later on this week. Nathan, how's it going?
It's going pretty good. It's been certainly a bit chaotic, but the good kind, and I know things will eventually settle down. But right now, I know this is a time in my life that I'll never be able to fully replicate again.
For sure, yeah, that is true. You only get one first job, and how was the Penn Mile on Friday? How was that card, and how's it kind of been, being out there so far at the track and kind of learning the ropes?
It's been real nice. Everyone there is already kind of joking with me and like as if I've been there for years, which is a great feeling to have to kind of be a part of that. It's been about just slowly, adding more and more and growing into my roles, whether it be race calling or marketing or whatnot. But everyone there is like they're patient with me. They know that it's only up from here when it comes to my time with them. And for Penn Mile Day itself, it was a nice day, good crowd, um, decent races to go along with it, and it was also just a good day to kind of really experiment with some things. Like I got to do my first kind of on-air handicapping stuff, which is another responsibility of being a race caller. So kind of testing out the versatility of my occupation, that was really fun. And also just getting to meet a lot of people that I've enjoyed, whether it be familiar faces to me like Larry Colmus or Jessica Paquette, or newer friends like Ashley Wood of the Pennsylvania Horse Racing Association.
Sure, yeah, there's so many people in the industry, a lot of people to meet. Talk a little bit about your background. You went to the University of Arizona in the racetrack industry program, and you've already called races at, we were talking, I think this is your 19th track you'll have called a race at. So just talk a little bit about your background, and you've already had such a great experience leading up to this.
Yes, okay. So for background, I didn't grow up in a racing state. I grew up in North Carolina, so no horse racing. So the way I had to play catch up was through FanDuel, which is a very bittersweet thing to say nowadays. Um, and books, documentaries, that was kind of my way of keeping up with it. National television. And then through that was my like education of horse racing from elementary school all the way to high school when I got admitted into the racetrack industry program, which was the only college I applied to. Not a strategy I recommend personally, but it worked out for me, so I have no regrets. I knew that was the only place I wanted to go, wanted to do, so I just went for it. And packing my bags and going all the way to the other side of the United States, it took a little bit of getting used to. It was a bold move, but it was one that I was greatly rewarded for. Um, the most powerful thing about the U of A is the opportunity to meet people. You are who you know in horse racing, and I can't replace that. The opportunities I got to just meet people, race calling or not. And then race calling kind of came with it as kind of an adventure. Even when I was at U of A, the closest racetrack typically was Turf Paradise, which was about 2 hours away in Phoenix. And during my first couple of years there, Craig Braddock, when he was around, he let me call races, even fill in every once in a while over there. That was how I got my first track under me. I was at the last season of Riedo, and then after that, it was just a lot of adventuring, really. Like, the best thing about horse racing is just all the places I've just kind of gone around just trying to hit. It was also my attempt at kind of making up for lost time growing up in a non-racing state. But through that, I would hit all these states, like interning at Colonial, got to call one there, thanks to Jason Beam, or interning at Horseshoe, where I got to call just as many races as I did at Turf Paradise, grand total. Um, it was just a little bit of here, a little bit of there, a little bit of that. I was just kind of hopping around and just getting a little piece of everything. Even if it was just one guest call, I was just always so happy to add that to the list. But it's also nice to be, after those 4 years of running around everywhere and meeting all these people, now I actually have an anchor point in Penn National where I can settle down a little bit. But, I'm also close to a lot of other places, so I can always explore, during an off day.
For sure, yeah, yeah, definitely the Northeast has a lot of tracks here to offer. What was that process kind of like? Obviously, Bogart, the previous announcer was retiring at Penn National. What was that process kind of like of getting the job and you're this great guy coming right out of school. How did that all kind of line up for you?
I like to think that it lined up starting with every year the U of A does a racing symposium where everyone kind of meets up, and that's the ultimate hub to meet people and schmooze. That's the fun word I love using. And one part of that schmoozing included my former professor, Elizabeth Rogers, who used to run Mahoning Valley in Charlestown. So she worked at two Hollywood casino Penn Entertainment Properties, which is the same umbrella that owns Penn National. So because of that, she'd already known some of the people there, including Chris Mackerlane, who oversees all the racing there. So because of that, she had told me back in June of last year to send a tape to him just out of the blue. He liked it, but that was kind of the establishment of the relationship, and we kept in touch after that. And then the coolest thing about Racing Symposium is that every year as a student, you get to pick a mentor that you get to have lunch with. It's basically 90 minutes to poke someone's brain. Um, Gold, in my opinion, is what it is. But for the last one, I picked Chris. Because I thought I didn't even think about Penn actually national at the time, because John Bogart hadn't been retired yet, and we didn't know that he would. But I thought this is just a great person to get to know. So I started with that, and I also ran into Todd Mostaller of PHPPA at the bar. That was another person I befriended with my party trick of memorizing Derby horses. All of this was to set it up so that when it was time for Bogart to retire, they thought of me. That's the culmination of all of those very nice social interactions. So they thought of me. They said, if you're interested, we'd like to for you to give it a shot, or at least apply. That's the words, to apply for it. So I thought, this is kind of perfect. The only thing I was worried about is that they announced the retirement in February. I didn't know if that was going to interfere with my last bit of school. But the good news was that wasn't a problem. Um, but through that, it was just, a steady process, interviews, all that stuff that you do. And kind of like in my own mind, I was just thinking, I thought I had a good chance, but I also knew, like, it ain't about being the best. It's about being what the company is looking for, which is a totally different thing. This isn't a competition per se. It's about fitting a part, kind of like a play. Um, but I was having fun during the interview process, which is an odd thing to say, but it's true. And also, it was just months of thinking and waiting and just hoping, like, okay, what's my backup plan if this doesn't work? But it worked out. And this is going to sound familiar, but this is yet another example of where I only applied to one job during college. I didn't apply to any other job. Just like how I only applied to one college, I only applied to one racetrack, and that was Penn National, and it worked out. Again, I don't recommend this, but I have so far succeeded with a one-track minded mindset, which is miraculous. But that was kind of the process of the whole thing. Um, and it was great every step of the way. It was a good teaching moment, and I'm just glad I put out my best self and someone thought, you know what, I want that at my track.
For sure, yeah. I know, with kind of any job, luck and timing, they play a huge role. So does raw talent. You've got plenty of it. And you've had a lot of great experiences. We were talking about calling it, more than a dozen tracks. And you've called, everything from, thoroughbreds to, standard breds and quarter horses too, right? Talk about kind of the differences in, how you kind of approach each race.
For We'll start with thoroughbreds because that's what I'll have the most experience in. Thoroughbreds I consider the base template because that's what I've practiced the most. For thoroughbreds, it's just about getting through the field. Fractions maybe if possible, but not a dead ender. The first goal for all three types of racing is to be as accurate as possible. Once you do that, you can start having a little bit of fun with it and adding details that you think are fun and would be good for someone else to hear. Like if a rider's about to do a triple, but you start with the basic brick house and then you build off of it. Um, that's the beginning for thoroughbreds. Standardbreds, it's a bit slower, so so my cadence is a little bit slower. The pacing's a little different. Most, standardbred races, they're between, a minute 50 to over 2.5 minutes, even though it's the same distance. It depends on the quality. But by doing that, most thoroughbred races don't last that long. So it forces you to slow down a little bit. You look instead of looking for the silks like on a thoroughbred, you instead look for the saddle towels usually because they're usually in pretty good view. And if you're really good, you memorize the driver colors. But that's so different because with drivers, it's actually about the guy himself. It's not the owner's driver outfit, that's the driver's uniform. So instead of saying, "Oh, that's Windstar Farm" for thoroughbreds, it's, "Oh, that's Clint Coy because he's in purple." That guy. Johnny V, he wears a million different outfits, but for standardbreds it's different. But also the movements are a little bit different. While it's slower and easier to catch, it's also, a little testier because it does require a little bit more patience to play out. But that also means you have more fun with it. For quarter horses, that's like a secret soft spot for that one because there is no strategy. You just say what you can see, and you hope that you're kind of right. And I kind of like that crapshoot sort of feel with quarter horses because I like being able to talk super fast and seeing how much I can get. Every single time it's a challenge, but it's a fun challenge because you don't necessarily have much to lose because everyone has their sympathies with you. They understand that you can't get everything done in 10 seconds, but it's fun to try. So quarter horses I have a soft spot for because of just the hecticness of it. I won't get bored of that, but you don't get bored of any thoroughbred race or standardbred race, really.
Sure, yeah, a lot of exciting stuff. Is there, one race or maybe one track that stands out in particular that was particularly interesting or challenging to call at?
Okay, for challenges, there's a couple of different because you've mentioned different things, particular racetrack for challenges. For a parimutuel facility, I think the most difficult track I ever did a one-off on was the fairgrounds. Because the trees are so tall that there is blind spots. So you have to work around that. And the really difficult part is that the home stretch is incredibly long. It's one of the longest in the country, about 400 meters. So when they swing into that turn, you actually can't see them very well. And they're also coming kind of straight at you. And I didn't have to deal with this, but John told me that during the days that it goes into the night, the sunset hits right on the horses. So that makes visibility even worse. Um, for but this one's more fun. The non-parimutuel tracks because they're so much more unpredictable. The weirdest and most challenging setup I ever was given was at the Harrison County Fair in Corydon, Indiana, because the original grandstand was shut off. It didn't meet certain safety requirements, so all the fans were in lawn chairs on the backstretch. So I didn't see anyone. Um, the whole infield was covered in tarps, and also the backstretch had trees. And the tarps would be shaped in a way that when they rounded the far turn, there was a solid 4 seconds where you just couldn't see him. It was a blind spot. On top of that, the camera person, I was standing on infield bleachers, So I was calling from the infield, not the outfield. And also, the camera person was on the same bleachers I was. So to not get into a shot, I had to actually take the second highest bleacher step so he could take the highest. So my view was even worse. But it was so fun because I felt like there was no, like with quarter horses, I felt like there was nothing to lose. Everyone would understand if something was difficult. It was very laid back, and my payment was two Ben Franks, all the donuts and vitamin water I could eat.
Nice, yeah, that's a great story. I love that, and I think in a lot of small tracks too in the industry of such hardcore fans too. There's a lot of passion and enthusiasm, and just even the horsemen and the women who make those tracks go round. No, yeah, that's a great story. How do you kind of approach your race calls? Like, what kind of values do you kind of like to an insight do you like to give to the listeners?
Um, in a perfect world, I would love for every race to have a sort of unique story, but not every race has that. The big thing is first just accuracy, having the whole field kind of in sight. But then the next thing is finding maybe a detail or two about either the individual horse, the trainer, the jockey, especially like if they're, a triple, for example, that's always really fun. Just something that makes that race kind of interesting. Um, like if a rider or a horse has a hat trick. Horses also, if they're doing something kind of fun statistically. Um, and one thing I'm really excited for with Penn National is I think I'll have a better opportunity to really get to work on that because I'll see these horses so often. So then they'll become my regular, for lack of a better word, cast of characters that I have to narrate. Since Penn National is built on its loyal regular horses. So that's something I'm kind of excited for, and I hope that I can kind of convey the kind of humble, blue collar, hardworking circuit and the war horses that make Penn National possible. But every track is kind of different about that. So yeah, definitely like I like the ideas of like Tom Durkin of being a storyteller, and getting to be a small part of the horse. Not about me, but about the horse. Getting to make the horse, the rider, everyone look good.
Sure, yeah. You mentioned Tom Durkin, some of the other announcers that you've met and talked with. What people, whether they're announcers or other people in the industry, what kind of people have, played, sort of a role kind of in your career so far and who's kind of given you some maybe the best advice too?
There's so many people to thank. I can't thank enough people because they all had a role in helping me succeed. I guess just off the top of my head, if we're just going to focus on announcers who really did help me out quite a bit. Well, Craig Braddock gave me my first race call and my first fill-in job. So those kind of foundational moments were really important. Right behind him was Mike Dimov, who let me call my second race at Riedo during its final year. So he gave me more of a county fair mentorship during that. So those were like the first, and first is I think very important. But I think after I was established as a race caller, I think the most important mentor I had from another announcer, just based off of like sheer time I had with him, was John Dooley. Because at Horseshoe Indianapolis, that's the track I before Penn National, presumably, was the track I'd called the most at. And he was very laid back. There was a lot of just, have fun, Nathan. But he would always chime in with, little nuggets of advice, such as don't announce that a horse has been claimed until after the winner's circle picture. That was a very kind of random but very good piece of advice there. Or just, I think the biggest thing that I took from him was just the attitude of being a race caller, being open, being willing to do things for your track, such as being an ambassador, being, an on-air person, and also just the way that he was able to add such details to a race that I really wanted to follow up on. Like he could just like rattle off the most random facts about the local jockeys there, or a horse even, or he'd find a new way to describe it. I just like that whole attitude. That and also another one that was really important in my early life was Matt Dinnerman, because I had talked to him about being a race caller before I had a race call under me. So he was the kind of guy who was kind of instilling those early values of practice, practice, practice. Focus on this. This isn't as important. Um, and we're still in touch. And I think the last one I should mention, there's a lot to talk about, is Pete Aiello. Pete Aiello, just like Matt Dinnerman, was another person who took me seriously before I had done anything to be considered serious. He was the first of that mentor lunch thing I was talking about. He was the first in my freshman year to be my mentor, and he expressed interest in doing so way before I actually had even gotten enrolled. So just kind of having that someone have that faith in me was extremely important. And just like with Matt, like he was always there with advice about techniques and also, what is good form? What is the professional and right thing to do as an announcer? That was extremely important. And when I got my Distinguished Student Award at U of A, he gave me this one line that he had heard from Luke Kreitbos, I think, that went along the lines of, I had pursued my dreams at U of A and I went on to succeed. Now it's your turn to pursue your dream. And I like to live by that.
Sure, yeah, yeah, really well said. Do you have any kind of advice, yeah, to that, maybe next generation of college students, high schoolers or younger, to any kids out there, who, might be interested in pursuing race calling as a career, or maybe even people looking for a career change too, and, haven't gotten as far along yet as you?
It's tough, it's rewarding, it doesn't make a lot of sense to most people. Um, and just don't be afraid to ask questions and to meet people. The more people you run into, the more people that you befriend, and the less people you make enemies, the better off you're going to be. You don't know when running into someone 5 years ago will then play out when you run into that person again, and that person might be the gateway to a new opportunity for you. And I'm not just saying that in the sense that like every person you meet is a transaction that could help you. Also, that person could be one of your best friends. Um, you'll meet some of the most quirky and odd people, but those are my people. So I feel like I fit in perfectly there, and I just love kind of feeling seen by other groups. So if you're going to pursue this, making friends is extremely important, especially because everyone kind of knows each other. Before you know it, you will be 6 degrees separated from everyone. I think just don't be afraid, but also as a young person, you are a hot commodity. Racetracks need you. And that kind of gives you a certain level of confidence of like, I'm a valuable asset. And as long as I market myself the right way, you know, I might even actually be spoiled for choice about who needs me. Um, like, just don't be afraid and just go for it.
For sure, yeah. Well put. And I always like to think, kindness first. So yeah, definitely great advice there. Well, yeah, best of luck, Nathan. Thanks so much for your time. And yeah, I hope you have a great week and a great start to your race calling career at Penn National.
Thank you very much. It was great to be a part of this interview.
Well, thank you so much for joining me for the Paddock Press Report. New episodes usually every Monday. This time, a special edition on Tuesday, of course, for the Belmont Stakes draw. Episodes come out at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Be sure to like, hype, comment, subscribe, whatever you feel like. We're just happy to have you watching. Always appreciate your time. Until next time, we'll see you at the races. Have a great day.